I mean, when we look at this Jonathan Gannon story that you keep on following as far as the tampering that happened between the Eagle or Monty Ossenfort reaching out to Jonathan Gannon, why do you feel like this is a story that you need to continue to seek answers for, Mike?
Because we're never going to get the answers if people don't look for the answers. Because the circumstances tell me instinctively, intuitively, that there's more out there that they don't want us to know. This was not a situation, even though they sold it this way, of the Cardinals having some sort of crisis of conscience where they said, hey, you know what? We did something we shouldn't have done. We feel like we should let you know. We called Jonathan Gannon during the 2 weeks between the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. And, you know, even though everybody violates the tampering rules and they get away with it, we felt compelled to self-report it. I don't buy that. I think the Eagles figured out something had happened. I think the Eagles complained about it loudly. I think the Eagles had the kind of evidence that kind of I looked at and said, oh boy, this isn't good. This created a distraction for the Eagles. This created a distraction for Jonathan Gannon. He spent time preparing for his interview. He spent time lining up his staff. He shouldn't have known he was a candidate. He shouldn't have known there was going to be an interview. It was communication that was completely prohibited, and it may have had an impact on the outcome of the Super Bowl. So let's keep it all buried. Let's keep it all quiet. Let's announce it to the world literally 5 minutes before the draft starts as some sort of a resolution between the two teams, like a settlement of a lawsuit. That's never happened before. The NFL, when someone commits a tampering violation, has a long history. Not that they enforce it all the time, but when they do enforce it, they say what was done. And they make a clear statement. And this just has something to it, and it had it from the get-go, that tells me there was more to the story that they don't want us to know. And when I had Howie Roseman, the Eagles GM, on our podcast right after the draft, and I tried to ask him questions about it, it was clear he didn't say anything about it. I don't think anybody said anything about it. I think they don't want to say anything about it. They don't want us to know what really happened. And the only way we're ever going to have a chance of finding out is if people ask questions, because I think we're entitled to know exactly what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've certainly asked them out here in the desert and gotten answers from Ossenfort and answers from Jonathan Gannon. We've talked to JG when he was in Indianapolis, and he seemed to kind of try to talk about the situation before it even became, public knowledge that, he had a conversation, the weird hiring process, interview process that the NFL has going on right now. But when you hear guys like, Vic Fangio, there's reports that Vic Fangio said it impacted lives. So you're on the side that that's not just hyperbole. You think that there was major impact from Monty Ossenfort simply reaching out to JG and saying, hey, are you interested in this job as we cut down to the final candidates?
I think giving him a heads up at a time when there should have been no communication caused Jonathan Gannon to spend time that otherwise would have been devoted to getting his defense ready for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. He spent time doing the things that you would do when your ship is finally coming in. This is the job you've aspired for your entire career. It's a messed up process where guys who are in the process of finishing things the right way with their current teams necessarily are distracted by preparations, by communications, by everything you need to do to get yourself in a position where you can go in, meet with Michael Bidwell, Cardinals ownership, Monty Ossenfort, and make the right impression and just blow them away and get them to hire you. He surely did something during that 2-week period that he wouldn't have otherwise done if he hadn't known about it. And anything he did took away from the time that he had available to prepare his Eagles defense for Super Bowl 57. And I personally believe, and again, we don't know this, but I think that the way that it all happened, it just tells me that, and I can see the Eagles. Let's put ourselves in the Eagles' shoes. After the Super Bowl, they're upset. How did this happen? How did this happen? Everything we put into it, we're up 10 points in the second half. How did this happen? And they started looking. They started asking questions internally. They started digging around. If Jonathan Gannon left any digital footprints of the amount of time he spent, with phone calls or work that he may have done on his company computer, whatever it may be, I feel like they came to the conclusion that this wasn't just a phone call. This sparked a major distraction and diversion for Gannon from what he needed to be doing, which pissed them off. Yeah. Why would they be pissed about it if they thought it didn't affect them? That was one of the reports that came out. They were really pissed. Howie Roseman was really pissed. If it had no impact whatsoever on the outcome of Super Bowl 57, there's nothing to be upset about.
Well, let me ask you this: do you feel similarly with other candidates that were hired?
What about? Are we going to do that really?
No.
Are we going to do what about?
I just wanted to ask if you felt similar, like the D'Amico Ryans. Obviously, his team gets blown out the previous week before he gets hired by the Houston Texans, and then Shane Steichen was
blown out because they didn't have a quarterback. I mean, is that it was D'Amico Ryan? And look, those situations were all handled properly. I don't like the current system.
Right. And that was my follow-up to the question. Yeah.
I think it should all wait until after the Super Bowl. I don't think, and the Gannon case is a prime example why the best way to do this is have a complete and total moratorium on any coaching interviews. So on the entire process, no one can do anything by way of communicating with candidates until after the Super Bowl. That's what it should be, because it necessarily creates a distraction. It creates a distraction when it's done properly. It creates a distraction when it's done improperly. But when it's done improperly, the distraction it creates is something that the rules should address, and that's what happened with the Eagles and the Cardinals.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to create a whataboutism as far as, D'Amico Ryan. In like the fact that you say that you agree that they just need to probably retool the hiring process and maybe take out the coaches or wait until after the Super Bowl is played, it probably would benefit everybody involved. I just think, just because the Arizona Cardinals were the ones to break the rules, and then, the Niners or the Texans happen to be within the rules, but it's a pretty similar situation, just at a different time in the playoffs.
Yeah, look, I think the whole system is a distraction. The whole system needs to be overhauled. I wrote about it in my other book, Playmakers, not fiction, although some people would say maybe parts of it are. When you're an assistant coach and you're under consideration for a coaching job, and you're also getting ready for a playoff game, and look, it's almost always coordinators who are under consideration for these jobs. So you're the offensive coordinator or the defensive coordinator, and you have an interview coming up, you had one, you're waiting to hear, whatever the case may be, you're under consideration as you get ready for this playoff game. When the assistant coach who's under consideration for that job gets home that night, if he's married, his wife does not say to him, how are the preparations going for your next playoff game? What she says is, rightfully so, have you heard anything about the job? Have you heard anything about the job? Have you heard anything about the job? Because that's the thing that's going to change their life. That's going to put them in a much higher tax bracket. That is going to be the realization of a lifelong dream that comes with money and status and power. And that's the thing. It creates inherently divided loyalties for the individual who's caught in the middle of it. So that's absolutely why that rule should change. But until it does, there's a proper procedure that needs to be followed. And the Cardinals, for whatever reason, didn't request permission to talk to Jonathan Gannon when they could have. And what was funny to me, funny, interesting, not funny, comical, was when they introduced Gannon back in February, Michael Bidwell specifically talked about everything they did to avoid creating distractions for their candidates, when we later find out that they created a very real distraction for Gannon in the 2 weeks before the Super Bowl.